These newspaper article readings are not for the faint-hearted or the squeamish. If you're at all sensitive, I might suggest these aren't for you. If in doubt, check the description below. It'll tell you which topics are covered in this particular episode. There's both human and animal suicides, and you heard that right. There's also horrific descriptions of injuries, as well as the deaths of youngsters. So don't do it to yourself if you're prone to nightmares, is all I'll say right now. Not all the articles are horrible. Some of them are uplifting, some of them show incredible bravery and heroism. There are near misses. So these were picked as showing life prior to health and safety, as well as for the crazy and curious details some contain, with other miscellaneous happenings that kind of struck me enough to post the articles to Twitter, despite not having too much relevance to Scotland necessarily. These are worldwide topics, and they didn't have any real connection to the projects that I was working on and researching at the time. I just happened to have come across them by the way, kind of thing. So we'll get into them, shall we? What we're going to do here is we're going to do a lucky dip of newspaper articles to really mix them up a wee bit, because while I'm doing the researches, I'm obviously coming up with the same kind of terms and things. So we'll mix them up even further. So to that end, I have all of the newspaper titles and dates of the articles.
Alright, what does the hat have for us this episode? Let's find out, shall we? We're beginning with the Glasgow Chronicle for the 16th of June 1847. It's an older article. Okay, we start with Curious Affair. On Friday morning, the wife of a respectable spirit dealer in Main Street, Gorbals, was astonished on entering one of the rooms of the house to hear a noise in the chimney. On looking up, she discovered something a considerable way up the vent, which she supposed to be a dog or a cat. On giving the alarm to a neighbour, they succeeded in pulling out, by the legs, an old woman in a state of insensibility. Medical aid was procured and she was removed to the police office on a barrow, where she was put into a warm bath and restoratives supplied, by means of which she recovered. She did not give a very satisfactory account of herself or her proceedings. It is supposed that she made her way into the house for the purpose of committing theft, but being alarmed at the approach of someone, she resorted to the means of attempting to escape up the vent, or at least of effecting a temporary concealment in it. As was to be expected, she did not make much progress in her apparent journey. The old lady seemed to be aware that an extraordinary act requires to be covered with more than a common excuse, and consequently she accounted for her conduct by stating that she had been seized with fever and was quite delirious. She was, however, completely restored to health on being presented with a small sum to relieve her immediate wants. That's from the Glasgow Chronicle for the 16th of June 1847. And while that can be taken as a fairly humorous story, it just is indicative of poverty that existed in some quarters in the middle of the 19th century, that she's gone to those lengths just to try and do for herself, whether it was theft or maybe she was just looking to get inside somewhere. I think that's a wee shame for this wee old woman, but it was nice that they kind of helped her out in the short term at least. See what we have next. We have the Daily Record for the 22nd of December 1905. Let's see what the Daily Record has for us. Okay, this is an interesting article. Lions escape from a train, shot from a waiting room window, from our own correspondent, dated Paris, December 21st. While a train bound for Rouen with a menagerie was passing through a tunnel, a van consisting of 4 lions struck the side and a corner was torn off. One of the lions immediately jumped on the line close to the house of the keeper of a level crossing near Varennes. The accident, however, was not observed until the train reached Rouen at 1 o'clock in the morning, when a large African lion leapt onto the platform, causing a stampede of the employees. Railway porters and gendarmes armed with rifles appeared on the scene, and from the windows of the waiting room shot the lion, which was walking on the permanent way. As the 2 other lions were frantically endeavouring to get out of the cage, it was decided to shoot them also, and they were killed in the cage. Meanwhile, the astonished keeper of the level crossing discovered the first lion sitting on the line, a few yards from his house near the entrance to the tunnel. The animal had injured itself in jumping from the train and was unable to run. The man telephoned to the nearest station, and presently a locomotive came along, on the tender of which were 4 farmers armed with guns, with which they shot the wounded animal. The menagerie proprietor estimates his loss at £2,000. And that's from the Daily Record, the 22nd of December 1905. If they could have been rounded up to have been put into cages and into railway carriages to begin with, why was that not an option that was taken? Why were the lions that were still caged shot? They weren't going anywhere, they weren't doing any harm. It seems like that was, I don't know, maybe the fear that was put into the people witnessing the event just drove them to shoot them just in case or something. But that seems overkill. That seems pointless. I can't get my head around that action. That doesn't make sense to me. So I wonder if the proprietor got his £2,000 for the loss of his lions. Sure, he had those questions too, with regards to why the caged ones were shot. See what the next article gives us. We have the Glasgow Courier for the 17th of January 1854. Another really old article. Okay, we have here a dreadful explosion of gunpowder. On Monday afternoon, about 5 o'clock, an explosion of gunpowder, which resulted in the serious injury of 7 individuals who have since been removed to the Royal Infirmary, occurred in the house of a man named Lloyd, a pastry baker residing in Old Vennel. The circumstances, so far as can be learned, are these. Lloyd occupies the upper flat of a tenement 3 stories in height. His brother-in-law, named Armour, a potter, and who is dumb, had gone out shortly before and speedily returned with a keg, which he signified he believed to contain butter. Where he obtained the keg is not yet explained, but he immediately seized a poker with the view of opening the keg, and finding that difficult, he thrust the poker into the fire, from whence he drew it red hot, and commenced boring a hole in the small barrel. It at once exploded, blew up the roof of the house, and seriously injured Armour, his wife, a woman who lives in the house with Lloyd, and 4 children. As before stated, the 7 individuals above named have been removed to the Royal Infirmary, but from the circumstance of Armour being dumb and very seriously burned, no satisfactory explanation of how he became possessed of the keg of powder has yet been obtained. In all, there were 9 persons in the apartment, but 2 children escaped uninjured. That's a crazy accident to have happened. And he wasn't dumb, daft, he couldn't speak, just for those maybe unaware. But he apparently also was illiterate then, being as he couldn't write the answers to the questions that the police obviously had for him as to how he obtained this keg of gunpowder. I mean, I would think that kegs of butter and kegs of gunpowder would be obtained from two very different places. I can't imagine there was a Walmart or Costco of the day where they just sold everything. I think shops tended to be fairly specialised as to what they sold. So, yeah, that's very strange. I'll have another. We have the Dundee Evening Post for the 5th of April 1905. Okay, this is entitled Record Railway Trip. What is perhaps the most remarkable and certainly the most painful railway journey on record lately came to an end in Constantinople. When the European Express arrived in that city a morning or two back, a man was discovered beneath one of the carriages. He had managed to tie himself in some way and had thus travelled the whole way from Belgrade, a journey of over 30 hours. Although the train had stopped at a number of stations on the way, his presence had never been suspected, and he was only discovered at Constantinople by a man who was testing the wheels. The strange traveller had become so stiff that he was unable to disentangle himself without assistance. He was half dead with cold and black from head to foot with dust. After having been given food and drink, he was examined by the station officials as to his reasons for such a dangerous undertaking, when it appeared that he had acted from motives of economy, not having the wherewithal to pay his fare. Deeming him sufficiently punished already, the authorities allowed him to go as soon as he was able to walk. That is quite the journey he took, and I wonder what his lungs looked like after that, if he was entirely black with smoke, soot and dust. He must have been breathing that in all the way. I can't imagine that didn't leave him with some kind of problem later in life. I would think that's fairly dangerous. Even if you're securely tied to the train, you're not in danger of falling and being run over, or just breathing in all of that yuck has got to be really terrible for your health. So he may have saved himself a few pennies, but I can't imagine he was able to escape consequences of that journey. We'll have a final one, I think, here. We have the Scotsman for the 27th of June 1902. Let's see what the Scotsman has. Okay, this is a shame to finish on this. It's not a particularly positive article. It's entitled Fatal Fall Over the Castle Rock. Between 9 and 10 o'clock last night, a fatality occurred at Edinburgh Castle. It appears that a soldier belonging to the Black Watch, who was said to be confined to barracks, endeavoured to escape from the castle by climbing down the rocks at a point facing Frederick Street. He is believed to have slipped and fallen to the foot. His body was very much mangled. When communicated with, the police had the body removed to the infirmary, after which it was conveyed to the city mortuary. 2 soldiers who were sent to identify the body were unable to do so with certainty on account of the disfigurement of the features. One of the soldiers, however, thought he recognised the body as that of a comrade who had been with his company to London in connection with coronation celebrations and who returned to Edinburgh yesterday morning. That's from the Scotsman for the 27th of June 1902. And that's a shame for that soldier that he had such a desire to escape that he was willing to risk his life and, well, ultimately die in that endeavour. I think we've had a similar story from Stirling Castle, where a soldier had escaped barracks and fallen over, was it something called the Ladies' Watch, or the Ladies' Lookout, of Stirling Castle. So perhaps life in the military was just untenable for some of these men, to the point where they were willing to escape in these kind of ways. It's really hard to get my head around that, though. Desperation is evident there, I guess. So that's where we end this episode, and we may see you for the next one. Take care.